So welcome to today's segment of Ask the Expert. I'm David Jameson, President of the AccelerateSC of Commerce, and as we've done in the past, I'm identifying that today is April the 27th, 2020, because things change so fast, we need to put a date on what we're doing. My guest today is Ted Pitts. Ted is the President and CEO of the South Carolina Chamber of Commerce. Welcome, Ted.
Thank you, David, for having me. And also, I want to thank you. David chairs our local chamber partnership committee and serves on the South Carolina Chamber Board. So, David, thank you for what you do for the state chamber.
Oh, well, you're very kind. Ted, you're around South Carolina, maybe not physically anymore, but by phone and by communications. I want to talk to you. What are you seeing are the challenges of reopening the state for business?
So first, if you look across the state, depending on what type of business you're in, you've either been wiped out or you've had some sort of change in your operations. So, when we talk to businesses around the state, most of them are not operating at full capacity. In some cases, they're, have fully shut down for the current time. And, folks are concerned. I think there's some hope that we'll bounce back in the summer in June, back to some sense of normalcy or the new normal. But then there's also some real apprehension from folks I've talked to that this may not be something that we come out of quickly. We basically pushed our economy into a recession, and businesses are trying to figure out what's next. And you mentioned at the beginning of this, as you gave the date, things change so fast. Things do change fast. And, today was the second round of the Paycheck Protection Plan that Congress passed. That is a lifeline to many small businesses across the state. And, I guess we're hopeful that that allows for some employers to be able to keep their employees on the payroll.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see how long this amount of money lasts. The first one was absorbed pretty quickly. Somebody asked me what I thought. I said, I think it's going to last somewhere between 30 minutes and 3 days. So I might be right.
Probably a pretty good guess.
That's right. So Ted, the governor has named a group that represents lots of business classifications to come together and try to talk about how South Carolina will reopen. And that group's name is AccelerateSC. I believe they have met once already. Talk to me, tell us a little about what that is and where you think that's headed.
Yeah, so AccelerateSC is the task force that Governor McMaster stood up. We had our first meeting last week. We've been broken into some subgroups, like today, Monday, the governance committee is meeting, subcommittees meeting. I'm on the business and industry committee, and we meet on Wednesday. And so it's really to look at pieces of how South Carolina's been affected, and to have folks with differing perspectives talking to different folks, coming together and trying to work on solutions to help South Carolina and the economy return back to normal. There's a healthcare and health and safety subcommittee that's meeting. So, we've got to balance safety and health with reopening our economy. So we've got to, as Dr. David Cole, the president of MUSC, said, we've got to safely reopen our economy. And that's what AccelerateSC's mission really is to make recommendations to be able to get things started back and hopefully back to some sense of normalcy.
Yeah, and as we have tried to read everything that is being published and trying to understand it where we can help our members better, we realize that this reopening is very complicated, far more complicated than flipping a switch.
Yeah, and it's funny, we all sit around and we watch the news, and in some cases the national news, and everything is almost presented through a New York City prism. And there is no New York City in South Carolina. Right there in your community, you've got small rural pieces of Aiken County. You also have kind of the town piece of Aiken County municipality that's different. So there really isn't a one size fits all in the state. What's being done in Charleston probably is different than what should be done in Barnwell, for example. So, we've got to look at putting some pieces in place that make common sense the central theme of it, because I ultimately believe that, the way we keep people safe is looking at recommendations from the experts, but South Carolinians using common sense as they go back to normal things that they've done prior to COVID-19.
Well, I was watching one of the news programs this morning while I was having that second cup of coffee, and they were talking about how national companies that operate more or less in all the states, how complicated it was for them, because they're right now experiencing 50 different sets of rules, and it's just impossible.
Yeah, and if you look at, places like Pennsylvania, where a governor doesn't appear to have taken much input from the business community and just shut things down. I've talked to my counterpart up there, and for example, they deemed that pallet manufacturers were not an essential business. Well, kind of the largest pallet manufacturer that sells most of their pallets to Clorox, for example, for sanitizer wipes and Clorox bleach, which is a central piece in the fight against COVID-19, you shut them down. A battery manufacturer that makes batteries for the respirators was shut down. So one thing I will say here in South Carolina, Governor McMaster has taken a responsible approach to looking at, kind of what was shut down and what's allowed to operate, and using common sense in those industries and types of businesses that were allowed to operate. So from a business community's perspective, I think we've had the most business-friendly orders, if you look across the country, and easy for businesses to clearly understand that, yes, I do hair, right? I'm a beauty parlor or a salon. I can't operate, but if I'm a certain type of retailer, that I can operate. And I think additionally, the governor's most recent clarification that does not discriminate against small retail, mom and pop retail establishments, allows them, with certain safety measures and following CDC guidelines, allows them to open and operate like the larger big box retailers are operating. Because I can tell you, you ride by Home Depot in Lexington, South Carolina, the parking lot is full on a Saturday morning.
Yeah, I think based on looking at the big boxes that have the garden shops, South Carolina will never look as pretty as it's going to look this year.
Yeah, you're right. You're right.
So back to AccelerateSC, I know the governor asked the South Carolina Chamber to be the conduit to the local chambers about this business survey.
Yeah.
And we're going to share that with our members, and hopefully we can help collect information. Talk a little about the survey.
Yeah, so the governor's office, we've done surveys, and a lot of folks say, hey, I'm over-surveyed, I'm surveyed to death. What I would tell you is that this survey that you there in Aiken are partnering with us, as well as the local chambers around the state, the governor's office came to us and said, hey, we'd like to get some real good data from folks as AccelerateSC looks at making decisions. So we work with the South Carolina Department of Commerce and developed a survey that we're distributing through local chambers and the state chamber and other statewide industry associations. And we need input. So as AccelerateSC looks, one of the things, if you call around, one of the biggest issues that folks aren't talking about is, okay, you do open the state back up, but where's my kid going to go while I'm at work? So there's questions on there that touch on childcare. You don't need decision makers making recommendations without the true facts from the front lines. So small business and business across the state, we're encouraging them to take the time to fill out this survey. You should be able to do it in less than 15 minutes. And that data is going to be presented to AccelerateSC as they look to make decisions and recommendations on what we can do to reopen South Carolina. So that's key, that folks in Aiken County that have their voices heard, and you get your voice heard by taking the time to fill out the survey.
Ted, does AccelerateSC have a mandate for when their recommendations should come forward?
Yeah, so we've been told that our work will be done within 30 days. So this wasn't a task force that's going to, overmeet and spend months figuring out what to do. We're going to meet every week, and then at the end of 4 or 5 meetings, we're going to make recommendations, and the governor will use that, as well as policymakers in the South Carolina Senate and House, and obviously we'll talk with congressional and federal leaders as well. But yes, 30 days is kind of the timeline that the governor's looking to have recommendations by.
That's good. And speaking of the General Assembly, I would say 12 weeks ago, the General Assembly thought that they had a huge surplus to work with, and that they were going to have some opportunities to do some one-time funding and to shore up some other things that were priorities. what's happened to that surplus now? What's going to happen?
You know, so you're right. So the state had the largest surplus in state history, budget surplus in state history. And the budgeting process was working its way through the legislative process. And obviously they didn't pass the budgets because of COVID-19 shortened session. But we believe they will come back in the late summer, early fall, and they'll have good Board of Economic Advisor assessments on what sort of revenue there will be. And you know, there may not be a budget surplus to spend. It may have to be used to plug holes, you know, from this year. You know, one thing that we clearly know is that unemployment claims are through the roof. In the last 4 weeks, we've had 350,000 new South Carolinians make an initial claim with SC-DO, our unemployment office, the Department of Employment and Workforce. And so when you look at that, you know, Director Elsie actually briefed the AccelerateSC committee on kind of the spend on our surplus, or on our trust fund. So the unemployment trust fund had about $1 billion of reserves in it. One of the states with the best positioning when it came to reserves. You know, we will run through that surplus, or that trust fund here pretty quickly if we continue to have unemployment claims increase and we continue to have people on the rolls drawing unemployment. So yeah, you're right, David. There is some concern and some uncertainty around what the budget's going to actually look like. You know, again, Frank Rainwater and the BEA are looking right now at what sort of projections they can predict or estimate. And unfortunately, there's so much uncertainty. You know, it's hard not to have to wait a little while so you have some more certainty and time behind you that you can look at data points. But you know, that's something that will happen at the end of summer and the beginning of fall, as the General Assembly will come back and look at the budget.
It is an important step, and it'll be difficult for the General Assembly to have to deal with, I'm sure. So my final question is, what do you think? Look in your crystal ball. What do you think is forever changed in South Carolina because of COVID-19?
Yeah, so I think the first thing that's forever changed, and it's probably more of a catalyst, something that was going to happen, is I think the delivery method on education is forever changed. So, you know, I have 3 children, a couple in middle school, 1 in elementary school, you know, so the delivery of their education has been different over these last 6 weeks. And I think there's some good things that can come out of that. You know, Superintendent Molly Spearman briefed the AccelerateSC committee that, you know, there is still a lot of students in South Carolina that don't have access to technology at home. And so there's a gap there. So the rural broadband issue comes out front and center. We need to solve it. You know, there's, I think, about 17% of students in South Carolina that are having to do all their schoolwork now on, you know, basically taking a paper packet, filling it out, and then turning it in like you would a written test. There are some students that can go totally virtual or e-learning. And then there's a lot of students that are blended. So I think when you look at education, whether it's higher ed or K through 12, you know, I think the technology is kind of going to be forced into the system. And I think that's something that's changed forever. Also, I think you look at, you know, just kind of meetings in general. And David and I have talked about this. The Chamber, one of the things that we do to provide value to our members is it's a networking or a place to connect with folks. And you know, what do meetings look like going forward? You know, do you pack 500 people in a ballroom and have a meeting? You know, I don't know that that's forever changed, but I think in as far out as I can see it, the next 18 months or 2 years, I do think that's something that's changed. And you know, I'm not saying for the good. I think it's probably something that we've got to live with, and you know, it's not necessarily something that we want, but ultimately, I think those 2 things probably have changed, at least are prevalent in my life right now. Meetings, chamber meetings, or other meetings that we do in person. And now, you know, we all wish we had bought stock in Zoom versus, you know, in-person meetings. And then also just kind of education. What does that look like going forward?
Well, and I think you hit one of the points you hit is the delivery of education through, and the need for a rural broadband access. It's doesn't matter whether you can afford it or not. In lots of places, it's just not available.
That's right.
And we've talked about it, and we would have eventually got around to it. But I believe the last few weeks have proven that for education, we need broadband access for everyone. For working remotely, we need broadband access for everyone. And for telemedicine, we need broadband access for everyone. So I think that my guess is that broadband and those issues have been advanced a decade because we've been down that path now. We know what the need is, and I hope to see some federal infrastructure funding to get that ball rolling.
Yeah, our past chairman, Lou Kennedy, president and CEO of Nephron Pharmaceuticals, during her reign as our chair, that was her number one issue is we've got to expand rural broadband. Her facility sits in Lexington County, but, a couple miles over in Calhoun County, rural broadband is a big issue. And I think you're exactly right, David. We've taken something that was a need to, and we've made it into something that's a have to. So I think you're going to see government through an infrastructure package and really the private sector step up and figure out a way, how do we connect all of South Carolina to the World Wide Web, the internet, to telemedicine, education platforms. So I think you're right.
So Ted, thank you so much for being my guest today on Ask an Expert. You brought us a lot of information. Keep up the good work, and we'll be in touch.
Yeah, let's hope there's football this fall. You get to the stuff that would return us back to some sense of normalcy. We need college football in the fall this year, and I think that's a hope. We got to figure out how to get there.
Well, let's see what happens. Okay, thank you so much. Good day.
Thank you, David.